Welcome to the virtual meeting at the Commonwealth Club. I'm Denise Michaud, Chair of the Grown-Ups Forum, and it is my pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker today, James Bostwick. James has been a trial lawyer in San Francisco for over 40 years and long been on the list of the top 100 trial lawyers in the United States. He specializes in catastrophic injuries, and he obtained the largest medical malpractice verdict in U.S. history. And that brings us to his book that he's going to be talking with us about today, his new novel, which is his first novel, Acts of Omission. And it's been inspired by a San Francisco trial in the 80s. So the program is going to be about an hour. If you have questions for James, please put that in the chat room under YouTube. And James, I'm going to go off screen, and when you are ready to take questions from the audience, just let me know and I'll come back on the screen. So thank you so much for being here, James, and you've got the floor now.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you very much. So here we are in this strange time. I am talking to you from my living room. With a sky that is so dark outside, you'd think a storm was coming, but it's just smoke. What a very unusual time we're living in. Fires everywhere, and a pandemic. I haven't worn a suit since March. I put it on just because I felt like dressing up. Working from home, like so many. Lawyers aren't essential, and boy, we really aren't. Those folks out there that are taking care of us and taking care of everyone, those are the essential folks. And I know all of us have such a remarkable appreciation for them and what they do. I'm here to talk about acts of omission. This is acts of omission here. It's an interesting story how it came to be. But first, I should tell you that I'm told that it is now a bestseller. I'm not quite sure what that means, but I'm told that it now qualifies as a bestseller. And happily, the hardbound edition is completely sold out. The first edition is now gone. We just published the paperback version. Just came out about a month ago, and of course it's mostly sold in bookstores, and most of the bookstores, unfortunately, are closed or having difficulty operating nowadays. Although it's doing very well. The Audible version has really taken off. It's remarkable. There are close to 450 reviews, and almost 400 of them are 5-star and 4-star reviews. I have to give a huge shout out to the author, Roger Wayne, who did the reader, who's an actor, who did a marvelous job of reading the book. And went way past what the author managed to accomplish. And this year, the book was nominated for the 2020 Harper Lee Legal Fiction Award. It's been a tremendous honor. And actually, finally, we are in the process of signing a contract with a movie producer and a very famous screenwriter to bring the book to the big screen. Now, nowadays, big screen, maybe, I don't know. Maybe it'll be a miniseries. Maybe it'll be on Netflix. Maybe it'll be something that we don't see in there. Who knows if we're going to have big screens? Our life is very different, isn't it? So they're going to make a movie out of it, and we'll see where we get to see it. By the way, there's an interesting story about the cover of the book. You can see it, of course, there's the Golden Gate Bridge in the background. And this is a place many of you probably are Bay Area folks, so you'll know where Cressy Field is. My wife, who's a photographer, and I went out one morning about 5:30, 6 o'clock, and we caught a wonderful sunrise. And we took a picture of the bridge and the water with this beautiful shine of the sunrise from behind us. And then a week later, I was in Montana, and I saw the most fabulous sky as a storm was coming in, and I got a picture of that. And I went to a marvelous artist here in San Francisco and asked him to put that sky over our bridge, and that became the book cover. And where Marty was, my wife was standing when we took the picture. I said, make that a runner all by himself on the beach, which of course is a metaphor for the story. First, I thought I would sort of talk about the genesis of writing the book. And by the way, I've given talks about the book, but this is very strange because you're at home, I presume. I'm at home. I'm talking to a screen. You're looking at a screen. And normally when I give this talk, I am talking to people. I'm a trial lawyer. I spend my life out there talking to people and interacting with them and seeing the looks on their faces and seeing their body language and seeing what interests them and what doesn't. It's very different when you're talking to a screen. And it has a lovely picture of Denise on it, but nothing alive. So the only thing alive on my screen is me, and that's not very inspiring. I love to write, but I write briefs. I've written briefs my whole life as a lawyer, and I'm pretty good at it, but I've never written anything creative, except a brief can be creative. Some of the judges think I'm being very creative. But I love to read. I'm a voracious reader. I read all kinds of things. I've read my whole life. And normally, of course, I like legal books. I like legal fiction. But they're all about criminal cases. And society has a lot of, we all learn from seeing a criminal case. That's great. That's interesting. Rarely is it about civil lawyers. Rarely is it about the kind of thing that, there are many lawyers that do criminal work, but 80-90% of the lawyers out there that are doing trial work are actually doing civil work. And it's not usually about those of us that do that. And also the thing that always bothered me, irritated me when I read the book, I understand it, but it was so unrealistic. It's not the way the law is practiced. It's not what happens in court. It's not what happens with your clients. And that always bothered me. So, and of course, it creates, when they do talk about civil lawyers, they're usually talking about bad stereotypes. We've all know about the ambulance chaser stereotype, and of course that's amusing and it's interesting once in a while, but in fact, and there are people like that, like in any profession, there are people that we would rather have somewhere else. But in reality, 95% of the lawyers out there doing civil work are working very hard. They're passionate. They're interested in trying to accomplish something for their clients. They're taking care of businesses that are in desperation. They're taking care of families. They are taking care of people that are injured. And most people, we don't, all of us think of ourselves as victims. We worry about if we ever got in a criminal situation, but most of us don't think about ourselves as victims. If something does happen to us or somebody in our family or a loved one, well, we don't know anything about that. Good civil lawyers, the work they do is very high risk. It's very expensive. They're usually, most of us are crusading personalities. We're very passionate about what we do. And you don't see that in the books. So one day my wife, who probably got tired of me complaining about that, said, look, stop complaining. Why don't you write your own damn novel? And I said, oh, no, I'm not a writer, you know. She said, you're a good writer. But she said, why don't, you know, I signed us up for a novel class. I signed us up at the university, and we're going to go. And by gosh, we went, and our instructor, Barbara Rose Brooker, a marvelous novelist and a wonderful professor of creative writing, 28 years ago, sat down with us in a class of maybe 30 people, all wanting to write their first novel. And at the end of about an hour, she actually said to us, okay, now I want you to pull out your paper and your pen, and I want you to write the first paragraph of your novel. Whoa, we all went, goodness, we didn't think we would have to do that on the first day of class. But we did. And it's interesting, and we had to read it to each other afterwards, just quite interesting. And it's kind of fascinating, but actually that first paragraph that I wrote in that class 28 years ago pretty much is the first paragraph of the book today. Why could I write 28 years ago? Well, because my wife and I had just had a daughter. She went to bed early, a new baby. We had already eaten. I had the evening free, and I wrote in the evening. And I wrote, and I wrote. I wrote, gosh, maybe 2/3 of it. And then our other daughter was born, and she did not go to sleep at night, and that was the end of the writing. So 2/3 into it, the book went back on the shelf in the computer. And that's a funny story too, sitting there in the computer. Don't lose your hard drive. Back it up. But there it sat. And maybe 10 years ago, I said to myself, my 28-year-old daughter and my 26-year-old daughter, maybe when the 26-year-old was 16, I said, why? I have a book that is 2/3 done. I need to finish it. That was kind of crazy. So I did. I sat down and I finished the book. And then I said to myself, okay, now what? I have a book. What am I going to do with it? I had people read it. They liked it. They had ideas. We did a little editing. It just sat there. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to find an agent. I didn't know how to find a publisher. And I'm, a full-time busy trial lawyer. So I'm back. Really never stopped doing that. Then a client of mine, a former client that had heard about it, said, can I read your book? And I was a little nervous about that because he is a movie producer, guy in Hollywood. I had represented, he had a brain damaged child from birth injury, and he got very involved when we did the discovery, took the depositions of the doctors and the nurses, and he was quite fascinated with the process. We became friends. And he said, I want to read it. So I gave it to him with trepidation. Well, 4 years went by. And I thought, okay, he hated it, obviously. He didn't want to call and tell me that. I understand. And then one day, not too long ago, he called me up and he said, I finally read the damn book. Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. I want to make a movie out of it. He said, my favorite movie and book of all time for legal fiction is The Verdict. Barry Reed wrote that. And of course, Paul Newman starred in it. And he said, this is like that. He said, I like this. We can make a great movie out of this. But he said, we got to get you published. I said, well, how do we do that? And he said, I got to find you some agents. And he did. He went out and got a couple agents, one in LA who, is he's not, he just represents somebody like called Michael Connelly, I don't know. And another guy in New York. And they, Tom Clancy he works with Tom Clancy or somebody like that. Anyway, they were pretty well known, very good agents. And so then we started working to see if we could get it published, editing, things like that. Well, what happened then was that we went to 10 publishers and they all said no. And my agent called me up and he said, Jim, this is a great book, but he said, I got to tell you, you're a new author. Nobody knows you. It's 550 pages long. They don't want to publish a book that's 550 pages long. It's expensive. It's too expensive. You're unknown. If you had a big name, fine. If you were somebody famous, your name is not Obama. We got to cut it. I said, well, we'll cut it. He said, yeah, I know. We need to cut at least 100 pages out of it. I said, well, Jim, trust me, we'll have a better shot. So I had sat down. He said, I know. He said, it's like asking you to kill your baby. And it is, because of course you think everything you wrote is just perfect. And of course it's not. And in reality, when you go through objectively, there are things that don't need to be there. There are things you liked that were interesting that really don't bring a thing to the table. So then with friends and my wife, who is a cutthroat editor and made some extremely good comments, which I've learned to listen to, I cut 100 pages out of it. And I must say that was the best thing that ever happened because it cut the fat out. It made it move faster. It got started faster. It got moving. And the next publisher we took it to said, we'll take it. We'll publish it. And we were on our way. That was a very interesting process. So what's the book about? Well, it's back in the 80s, I tried an interesting, kind of fascinating case. Took about 9 weeks to try. And it's very loosely based on that case. And that gives it the structure, but it's highly fictionalized version of that case. The book is about a wonderful young man who became paralyzed when he was 16 in a tragic accident, and a struggling family. And they were having such a hard time taking care of him. And it turned out that the he didn't need to be paralyzed. There was, we thought, medical malpractice in his care, and the book basically talks about that, but it takes off from there. And the interesting thing is that it wasn't just a medical malpractice case, but it's also about a lawyer, not the lawyer that tries it, not the lawyer that is the protagonist in the book, but it's about the lawyer that represented him first and who failed him, who did not find out that there was medical malpractice, who let the statute of limitations run, and who had to be sued. So it's a legal malpractice case about a medical malpractice case. The problem is that the lawyer that had to be sued is probably the most famous lawyer in the country, loved by everybody in the public, because the media is crazy about him. Always good for a great quote. A San Francisco icon. And someone that had all the resources and was a very difficult person for a young lawyer to take on. A young lawyer that was barely holding it together. That's what the book is about. I'm not telling you that's what the case was. I'm telling you that's what Acts of Omission is about. Acts of Omission is basically a David and Goliath story. But more than that, it's a San Francisco story. It's a Bay Area story. It's your town. Those of you that are in the Bay Area, it's your characters. It's your history. That's what it's about. And for those of you that have been around long enough to remember some of these folks who were around in the 80s, you will recognize some pretty interesting characters. Definitely the novel is fiction, but its structure and its inspiration was based on that wonderful family and that case. You might be curious as I talk about all this is, who am I and where did I come from and all that. I went to law school at Hastings, grew up in Southern California, actually down in Imperial Valley, which is not only a pandemic hotspot, the pandemic hotspot, unfortunately, right now, but also one of the hottest places. It was 127 Sunday. I know, I looked up. Then I grew up in the San Diego area, went off to the University of Washington and came to Hastings here in San Francisco, where I went to school during the summer of love. And I've only done trial work my entire career. I was lucky to start with a firm that did trial work. I gravitated to cases involving medical malpractice because I was a pre-med student. I loved medicine. My father was a doctor. My mother was a nurse. And so I've only done trial practice. I do it all over the state of California. I do it in other states. Actually, most of my cases come from other lawyers. They bring my firm, they bring me in because we're specialists. And we come in to prepare and try the cases. I'm a member of the bar in Hawaii and in California, and I work kind of all over. Still working full time. And as a contingent trial lawyer, I'm only paid if I win. That's the nature of the beast. I'm married, 5 kids. Now live in Marin since the rents went up in the city. We moved out, and now, of course, unfortunately, the city is a ghost town. So, it might be interesting for you to hear about the process, writing. Many times when I give these talks, that's one of the things people ask about is, well, what is the process like? Particularly for a lawyer who has only written briefs. Although, you know, when you write a brief, you've still got to tell a story. The judge still has to be interested. You still have to tell a story. And so that kind of gets you into the process of telling a story. Not the same, however, as creative writing. The way I went at it, I didn't use an outline. Many people have to use an outline, and many people do better with an outline. I didn't. Maybe because I had the structure of a case, so I had the outlines, the bare bones of some things that had happened, some things that kept me to a certain start and beginning and end. But for me, I just felt it was better if I just let it out there into the computer, into the pages, and let it go. And I found that, like exercise, it has to become a habit. You have to do it every day. I mean, you can have a day off you take, and you obviously, when I'm in trial, I didn't, because trial is a 24/7 thing. But when you're not in trial, you need to do every day, you need to spend a few hours. And for me, it was in the evening. At first, when my daughter was finally to bed. And what I would do is I would read what I'd done the night before. And when I did that, I'd find, oh, it wasn't as brilliant as I thought it was. Wow, it needs work. And I would start editing, and I would change it. I would fix things, and that would get the juices flowing. That would get things moving. Then I would hit the end of what I'd done the night before, and it would just flow right on into writing for another hour or two. And then I would go over that same process the next night. And the momentum builds that way. One of the things that I found very, very fascinating about the writing process is that, well, it takes over your life. When you're writing, these characters, and they are highly fictionalized, these are people that are made up, even though it was loosely based on a case I tried. Most of the characters are total fiction, but they start having a life. They have a life of their own, and you find yourself in the shower, and and sleeping, waking up, and dreaming about them in the shower, thinking about what's going to happen to, how's Matt going to do, what Matt going to do next, and then you stop and you think, wait a minute, Matt is a creation of yours. I mean, you can tell Matt what to do next, but that isn't what happens. Matt begins to do things out of your fingers in the process of writing. Matt starts coming alive. He starts doing things. Other people start doing things you never imagined that they would do. And this story goes off in ways that you hadn't even envisioned. And that's fascinating. That's a wonderful part of the process. That's when I think the creative writing process comes alive for me. And that's when the characters become alive. And I think, I have a feeling that in the books we like, the books I read that I really like, I have a feeling that's what has happened with those writers. I think that those characters have developed a life of their own. And I found that quite fascinating. So you might ask, well, what might you gain by reading the book? I mean, what would it have to offer you? Well, it's fun. It's got romance. It's got novel stuff and danger and betrayal and all those things that are wonderful in fiction and make novels fun. But mostly what it is a very, very real, I think, and this book has been read by many of the most famous civil and criminal trial lawyers in the country. And that's been the comment that they have made to me, happily, because it was my goal. This is real. This is what it's really like. This is what it means to be a lawyer. This is what it means to become passionate about what you do. And this is what makes trial lawyers tick. I wanted to show what inspires crazy crusaders like me and other people out there, what motivates us, what scares us, how we think, how does the legal process work, what really happens in court, why do people do what they do, and yet at the same time make it fun and interesting, not pedantic. And that's what I hoped to accomplish. And in the end, then you learn about the thinking of a lawyer and the process the lawyer goes through and the risks and the conflicts and the terrible conflict you can get in between the interest of your client and the interest of you and your family and your life, and how in the world you resolve those. And then what happens when you try a case. But at the end, it's also not just that, not just what it's really like in the law, but it's intended and meant to be something that is totally understandable to a lay person. I hope if you do decide to read the book, that you enjoy it, that it does give you something, that it gives you something interesting that you maybe didn't know. And if so, I hope you tell your friends about it. Maybe write a review. In this world, especially today, when the bookstores are mostly closed, it's word of mouth. Word of mouth is everything. And happily, that is happening. I'm at the point, Denise, where I've pretty much reached the end of what I was going to say. And I can normally at this point, what I would do is I would ask the audience if they would like me to read the book a little bit, maybe 10 minutes or so, and then we could have questions. But Denise, if you're there, maybe you could tell me what you think.
I had to plug in. So
yeah, well, that's the way. Listen,
and then now I see myself now. I think it'd be great if you could read some passages from your book, so we get a feel for your writing. And
okay, I think at this point, if I read, for 10 minutes or so, then we could have, 15 minutes of questions. So
that's perfect. Perfect.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to give you back.
You're going to give me back
the floor.
All
yeah.
right. I usually read the first chapter because it doesn't give too much away. San Francisco, 1984. The trial was over. Matt stared at the implacable gray wall in front of him, unwilling to turn the ignition key and break the stunned silence that had followed him from the battered courtroom to the empty garage. It was remarkable how quiet it could get when a jury said no to parents who had lost their only child. Matt couldn't exercise the expression on the faces of his clients when the verdict was read. They were completely shattered. There was nothing Matt could do to ease their pain. Now they had to put their lives back together, and he had to find a way to pay the rent. Jamie had been alive when Jim and Mary Olson first came to talk with him about the drug that had destroyed their son's liver. Their doctor had received no warning from the manufacturer that the medication he ordered for Jamie had previously caused the death of several children. In Matt's office, the little guy had been so excited about riding in a genuine cable car. After 2 years of Matt beating his head against the company corporate brick wall, the case finally got to trial. By then, Jamie had died. Matt never had the chance to give him the model cable car he bought him for his 7th birthday. On the eve of trial, the pharmaceutical giant finally made a reasonable offer. Matt had advised his clients to settle. Mary would have been happy to have the case over, but Jim wanted retribution. Matt pulled out all the stops to give them the justice they deserved. His clients had depended on him, and he'd lost. His stomach twisted. He hated to lose, and he knew this case would continue to haunt him. Scenes from the trial were going to replay in his head forever. Losses left a void that his victories never quite filled. 5 o'clock. Emily, his office manager, would be anxious for him to get back to the office. He needed to deal with a pile of work and clients who had felt neglected during the trial. He thumbed through a stack of papers Emily had given him to go through. Anything to take his mind off what had just happened. It's mostly bills, of course. He saw a circled note about some new case she wanted him to call a lawyer about. She had underlined the words "game changer." Yeah, right. He'd heard that before. He turned the key and the blazer jumped to life. He headed home to change his clothes. Work could wait. He needed a dose of the bridge. Matt parked next to the St. Francis Yacht Club. He stretched by the seawall, savoring the panorama and acrid tang of the moist air. The pastel city cascaded down the hillside to meet White Cap Bay. Fleets of sailboats wheeled around their marks, their crisp Dacron sails thundering in rapid succession. The competitors heeled, close-hauled, into the northwesterly gale. They angled toward the Golden Gate Bridge, its massive columns silhouetted by shafts of sunlight. Further down the beach, sailboats skimmed between the racers and the ferry boats, a kaleidoscope of dorsal fins dodging back and forth across the wind. A tendril of fog extended under the bridge, tentatively testing the resolve of the warm afternoon. All around him, people were running, walking, or bicycling to and from the distant towers. The balmy weather had obviously put a serious dent in the city's afternoon workforce. He felt the darkness coiled within him gradually begin to release as he ran toward the dying sun. He recognized runners and walkers he literally only knew in passing. Most runners, he had noticed, acknowledged only other runners, and walkers, other walkers. Seldom did crossbreed socialization occur. Their dogs were more egalitarian. A running magazine pundit had once opined that this stretch of beach had more beautiful women per mile than anywhere except Malibu. Today, Matt could almost believe it. Running through the pain of 3 exercise-free weeks of trial, he gradually became anesthetized by his surging endorphins. Near the end of his run, he saw his favorite fantasy approaching. He'd first noticed her a few months ago. She usually wore shapeless winter sweats. First, he almost didn't recognize her in the colorful lycra. It's 1984. A large brimmed running hat pulled low over sunglasses couldn't quite conceal her prominent cheekbones, smooth olive skin, and elegant nose. He smiled at her as she passed, but for naught. She acknowledged no one as she ran, at least never him. Well, given the reality of his life, why should she? He was a divorced father, close to 40, with more gray hair than he would like. He hadn't been in a serious relationship since his marriage. He'd cobbled together a reasonably successful law practice, but he always seemed to be on the edge financially. Now that he'd lost this case, he was going to be well over that edge. Matt collapsed on the grass. As his breathing quieted, he stared across at the uninhabited headlands rising serenely above the bay. His dream in going to law school and representing injured people had been to make a real difference. He'd been so ambitious, so ready to take on the world. Now the only thing he cared about in his life was his son. Maybe he was just really tired. Matt decided his fantasy runner should be a model or an actress. He wanted her to love the mountains as much as he did. Perhaps she also had studied ballet, loved dogs, cooked Cajun cuisine as a hobby, and was a Class 5 whitewater kayaker. On the other hand, with his luck, she was probably married, had several kids, and hated lawyers. Matt let himself into his apartment, poured a pitcher of water, and dropped into his favorite chair on the deck. The gray mantle was just starting to win its daily skirmish for control of the bay. In the misting twilight, he could just make out the burgeoning lights in the flats of the Marina District below. He let the gusting air cool him down from his run. After his shower, he hit the button on his answering machine. Most of the calls were predictable. A few friends checking up on him, call from Lena, the woman he'd been seeing, and the standard 4 calls from his ex-wife, Susan, worrying about money and their son Grant's schedule. There was also a message from Emily. Hi, Matthew. That verdict was bull. I think it was that squinty-eyed accountant they picked as foreman, a ringer. I know you're thinking about running away. Don't, or our house of cards will tumble for sure. We knew it was tough. You did everything you could, and then some. The air pent up in his chest escaped slowly as he listened. Don't forget to call Fred Stadall. He called a bunch during the trial and said he was anxious to talk to you about a dynamite new case. I left you a note about it, but I know you never read those. He was being sort of mysterious about it, said his home number's listed in Marin County. Well, see you in the morning. Matt stared at the floor for a moment as the machine recycled its 84 machines. He wanted today to be over, but he should call the man and at least accomplish something positive. Stadall answered on the first ring. Matt, how the hell are you? Damn sorry, by the way. I heard your case didn't go so well. Matt never failed to be surprised at the efficacy of the trial lawyer gossip network. About as bad as it can go, but then it's always a roll of the dice. Ain't that right? You can't predict them. Leave anything on the table? Drug company offered $250,000 to settle just before trial. Hell, the case could have gone into 7 figures. No wonder you went for it. Yeah, well, thanks, but what the hell? That number looks pretty good right now. Matt sat slumped, his head resting on the back of the chair. How's it going for you? I heard things have been a little rough lately. Fucking understatement. You hear what that asshole Sal Conti did to me? Law partners for 10 years. And he locks me out of the office. I'm talking personal papers, photos of the kids, not to mention my files. Had to get a goddamn court order and get the files so I could represent my clients. Good Lord. Man's really out of control. Then hasn't he always been? When you're called the prince of personal injury and the newspapers love you, I guess you think you can call the shots. Stadol growled in agreement. Yeah, like that young lawyer I met back east during that huge case. Hired the kid away from another firm on the spot. Poor bastard sold his house, moved his wife and kids to San Francisco to go to work for the world famous Salvatore Conti. Oh shit, yeah, I think I remember that. Guy shows up for work Monday morning. And Sal throws him out in the street. Says he changed his mind. Go back to Boston, he said. Got my own damn problems, he says. The cold son of a bitch. I guess you can't say you weren't forewarned, can you? Think you can work things out with him? Nope. Dogfight all the way. And he owns this town, courts and the media. They both thought about that in silence. Well, enough about my problems. I was calling to see if you'd be interested in handling a case I took with me when I left. You're not handling it yourself? Matt's curiosity was piqued. Most of Matt's case came to him by referral from attorneys who were not real trial specialists, but Stadol was a trial lawyer. He could try the case himself. Why offer it to Matt? I can't handle it because I'll probably be a witness. Fred got right to the point. This may not be the best time to talk to you about a new case, but I have to find this client a lawyer soon because the statute of limitation is about to run. Fred, if the statute's about to expire, there won't be much time to investigate. I just lost a case, remember? I can't risk jumping into a case with time problems. Look, I never sent you a case before, but I always figured you were the one I'd go to if my family had a problem. These people really need help, Matt. Matt pinched the bridge of his nose with his fingers. What kind of a case is it, Fred? There was a brief pause on the other end. It's a malpractice case. Client's a young man that lives in San Diego. He was hurt in a crash and the hospital missed the diagnosis. Oh, okay, well, that doesn't sound so complicated. What's our time problem and how bad was he hurt? And they cut to the chase, Matt. I'm talking about a legal malpractice case. Stadol took a deep breath. The kid's paralyzed. And the defendant is Salvatore Conti.
Hey, that was excellent. Thank you for that. So, you know, this is your first novel. It's pretty good that it's a bestseller and going to be made into a novel, a movie. And I'm sure people are watching you and they feel like they have a book in them too. What do you think went right for you in terms of getting this book being so popular and to be a movie?
Well, I was very lucky, for one thing, to have a wife that pushed me into it, to have a wonderful family and friends that helped edit it, great agent, and my movie producer friend. If it hadn't been for him, there's no way. This is such a hard thing to do. Not, you know, the writing, writing is difficult, but getting a book written is one thing. Getting it out there, I'm very, very lucky. And I'm lucky that I have good friends. I have some people that pushed it, and and lucky that people liked it. But for those people out there that are thinking, could I do it? Yeah, if I can do it, you definitely can. I mean, and even if maybe it does, maybe it goes somewhere, maybe it doesn't. But the creative process is wonderful. It's fascinating, and it's something different.
Yeah, so it took 28 years and 4 years of waiting for this person to call back. Um, Obviously, it's worth it, I'm sure. But what would you have done something differently?
Well,
Or does it feel like time's flown and
it's well, you know, for me, it worked out. But I think that it's very unusual. I mean, who takes 28 years to write a book? I mean, it's a very unusual thing to have those kinds of things come in between. And so that's I would keep going. If you get going, you want to keep going, and I think that helps a lot. And I think that you got to the people that I know out there that are writing, they're contacting me, they're contacting other people, they're getting all the help and ideas they can, and they're keeping the iron in the fire. And I didn't, and
mm,
I'm just damn lucky that it's come to fruition at this stage. And that's what I would do differently. I would keep going.
now what does your instructor, Barbara Rose Brooker, think of you? She
Oh,
must be
we're
very proud.
buddies. She's great. She is. I think she's a marvelous writer. She had Goldie Hawn set up to play her in a movie on a book she wrote called The Viagra Diaries, a fabulous book. And of course, Hollywood did what Hollywood does, and so she wrote another book about that called Love Sometimes. It's a marvelous book, and it talks about Hollywood. And boy, I've now am experiencing the Hollywood folks, and that's just a different world.
Hmm. Well, so we have a
And
question. Oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah.
from the audience. She wanted to, she's asking, could you expand on the ways working as a trial lawyer helped you shape this mystery and thriller?
Yes. I think that it helps because, well, many people that write books that are really good at it have to do a huge amount of research to write about areas that they don't happen to be familiar with from their own life, and they do marvelous research, and it's amazing what they can produce. Um, but it's never. I don't think it's quite the same as if you've lived it. And
Mhm.
I think what helped me here was I was writing about a passion. I'm lucky. I never planned to be a trial lawyer. I didn't even know what a trial lawyer was when I was going to Hastings. I was going to go to get an MBA and do business or something. I don't know. Um, I, I, but trial work became my life, and I love it. And I don't just love the process. I do love the process, but I also love what we can accomplish for people, because there are so many people out there that really don't have anybody out there to fight for them, and we can make a difference in a life. And that kind of knowledge and how you get there, and all the years of experience that I have, and I say over 40, but it's a lot more than that. I'm well into my 70s, and that brings a lot to the table when you're writing about uh, what you do and what you love, uh, and you're trying to keep it real.
You were mentioning that your colleagues read it, some of your colleagues, and they said, yes, this is very real. And can you give us an example or two of what you mean by that? Like what is, where, you said some TV series, other books are, don't really represent the reality of what's going on.
Well, especially when you're on TV, and especially in a movie. I mean, those folks are having to take. I mean, my book's 450 pages long. It has to be crammed into 2 hour movie. I mean, there's going to have to be a lot left out. You can't do a 9 week trial in a 2 hour movie. So
Mhm.
it has to be truncated. But when you bring it down, and I had to truncate a 9 week trial into a book so that people would not give up in exhaustion. And I had to make it interesting to read. So I have to leave a lot of things out. But the key is when you are writing about what actually happens, you shouldn't take shortcuts there. You have to talk about what is real. And the real things, for instance, a classic thing that happens in all the time with lawyers is that you're conducting a business. You're paying rent. You're paying salaries. People that work for you depend on you. Your family depends on you, and it's a business. On the other hand, you're doing something you love and is a passion, and you're representing people that have one chance in their whole life, and that's everything to them. Yours is just another case. But it also is what maybe is going to pay the rent. It's also maybe what's going to make sure that you can go on and do the other cases in your office. And there becomes a tension between the two. There comes a point in every case where you have to say to yourself, what's right for the client and what's right for me and what's right for the for my business. And you have to, it can never be what's right for your business. It always has to be what's right for the client. But that is easy to say. It is a very difficult thing to carry out in real life, in real time. And not only that, when you're making these decisions, they put money on a table and they say, take it or leave it. And if you took it, you could pay the rent for 6 months or a year. And if you don't, you could lose the case. And you might get more. But the client is looking to you, and the client wants to know what to do. And that's not enough money for the client, but 0 at the end of a case is also really not enough money for the client. And every trial is a roll of the dice. It's very, very difficult. And that kind of process is something we all have to go through, clients, lawyers, and it's not dealt with very much. It is a bit in the book, though.
And you were saying that you develop the characters develop as you write. Did you know the ending? I know it's inspired by true events, but did you know the ending?
No.
Before?
No,
So
I
was
didn't.
that a surprise to you when you came to, or yeah, was that a surprise when you?
Yes, I did not know what the ending was going to be until it happened. And I don't know what the ending of the next one will be until it happens, and I don't know what's going to happen next to these folks, but it's in process. It's meant to be a trilogy.
Oh, okay.
So there,
So of course, a big important question is, if you could pick any actor, since hopefully this will be a movie, what would be the actor that represents the main character to you? Just so we can visualize it a little.
Well, Paul Newman. Unfortunately, I can't get Paul to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Second best.
Second best. Well, we've had so many conversations about this, and he's never done anything like this. It's not what people think of for him, but I like Bradley Cooper for the role. I don't know why, but I just think he could do it. I think other people have other ideas, and we'll see. We'll see in the end. It will be somebody that is good, that they can get to do it also. It'd be nice to be able to pick who it is.
That would be nice. So maybe just end with this question for, I'm sure, many people who have a book in them, they want to get it out. 28 years of writing, you didn't give up. What advice would you give to someone who's aspiring to get their first book out or still writing?
It's going to sound strange, but just spit it out. Get it out there. mean, what I finally learned is if I just spit it out and got it on the paper, I can fix it.
Mm.
And it'll come, you can come back, you can edit, you can change it, get it out there. It's then that the juices start flowing. Get it out there. Don't overthink it. Let it develop a life of its own. And I didn't write for 28 years. I wrote for about 2 years back then, and then I wrote for about another not even a year. And I was working full time and still am. And so if you devote yourself to it, you can do it a lot faster than that. But I get it out there, let it roll. Think outside of the box, which is, we're in a time right now where it's an opportunity. It's not a good opportunity. It's a bad time, but it's a good opportunity to think outside of the box, to try to pull people together. More than ever in any of our lives it's never been like this. Wherever you come from, we need to learn to talk to each other. We need to pull together. We need to take care of each other, and we need to become more what we know we are.
Yeah, more connected. Well,
Much more
so
connected.
James, if people are interested in contacting you or finding out or purchasing your book, what would be the best way for them to reach out?
You can always contact me with my email, which is easy. It's james@bostwickfirm.com. Most all the bookstores in the Bay Area have the paperback. Of course, the hardbound sold out now. It's on Amazon, and you can get it in paperback, Kindle, Audible, not in hardbound unless you buy a used one. So it's definitely available. But and of course, my son works for Amazon, so I have to give him a plug. But I believe we ought to go to our local bookstore, because the local bookstores is what keeps us reading. It's what keeps us interested. It's where we can go and look, and it's where we can talk to other people when we can talk, when we can actually do that someday, soon, I hope.
I agree. Well, I want to thank you so much, James, for being here today. This is James Bostwick. Thank you so much for joining us. And that concludes our virtual program at the Commonwealth Club. You can check upcoming programs at commonwealthclub.org. And everyone, please stay happy and healthy. And thank you for watching.
Hi, I'm Dan Ashley, the evening news anchor for ABC 7 News in San Francisco, and I hope you and your loved ones are staying safe, healthy, and comfortable during these very challenging times. I am also a proud board member of the Commonwealth Club, one of our most important Bay Area institutions. The club has been hosting wonderful events with exciting speakers and topics in the Bay Area for over a century. In times of crisis, good information and strong connections in our community are especially important. And during the current COVID-19 crisis, the club has really stepped up. Since March 6th, the club has brought you over 200 live-streamed events with speakers and panelists, including past governors, secretaries of state, university presidents, and noted health experts. Every program includes a live chat, so you and viewers all over the Bay Area and beyond have been able to ask these experts the questions that are on your minds. Every program has been neutral and unbiased in true Commonwealth Club style to get to the bottom of the issues that are so drastically affecting our lives. The club has done all this public service despite being profoundly affected by the crisis. The inability to hold events for the past 2 months has forced the club to cut its budget and staffing by 50%. The remaining staff are working from home to bring the community these valuable and informative live-streamed programs. The club needs your support to continue its shelter-at-home programming. Please make a tax-deductible donation to the club now by texting the word DONATE to 329-4231. That is, donate to 329-4231, or visit the Commonwealth Club website, commonwealthclub.org. We need the club to be here in the months and years ahead to help inform and educate as we figure out how to get our society and our economy safely moving again, consider changes to the way we live, and work as a result of this crisis, and take steps to prevent a future pandemic. Once again, please support the Commonwealth Club now by texting the word donate to 329-4231. That is donate to 329-4231, or visit the website commonwealthclub.org. I want to personally thank you for supporting one of our community's truly great organizations. I'll see you on ABC 7 News. And hi, I'm Dan Ashley, the evening news anchor for ABC 7 News in San Francisco.